All right. So what are the key components to building out this prospecting machine? Leslie, I know you had a really good point on time blocking. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think this is a really great place to start because a lot of times, especially in sales roles, all we hear is like, yeah, just block time on your calendar for prospecting. And here's how much time or how many calls you need to make. But like the reality is, at least for myself, I put prospecting on my calendar. And then whenever life happens, like my 6-year-old decides that, she we're just gonna be late for school. That's fine, right? Prospecting is the first thing that I'm bumping. Prospecting is the first thing that I'm like, oh, I'll get to that later. Or if I get an email that pulls me in a different direction, like that's the first thing to move. So trying to think about some like different ways to time block, whether it's I've seen like quite a few people be successful with putting it on there and just saying like, how many hours a week do I want to have prospecting? Trying to front load that. Like for me, I know if I start making calls, if I'm not to like 75% of what I want to get to for my calls before lunch, like it's probably not gonna happen. I don't know, just me. I see a couple nods. Like anybody else, that the same thing? Like how often are you sticking to your prospecting blocks? Let us know.
Oh, right. If you guys
Mhm.
really want to make these deals happen, you got to keep filling your pipeline. And Darren, I know you had a really good point on having a plan, right? Making sure you actually have a strategy going into this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about like where we are in the year, right? Last week of September, things are getting a little dicey going into the end of the year. I think LinkedIn put a poll out that said 67% of sellers missed their number last month. So like, listen,
Ooh.
like it's getting a little bit challenging, but I think that where we can come in here is finding that low hanging fruit and having a plan around who can potentially buy for us, right? We say the intent to buy score is something that you're going to see as you grow in your SDR life into an AE, and what's the ideal client profile of somebody that's going to buy. And so when I think about low hanging fruit, I think about Sales Navigator, and I think about like who knows who we are, who is following my company, who has bought from us in the past, right? Who did we lose a deal to 14 months ago that maybe has an interest in buying with us now or move to another organization? So there's so many of these things that make you not cold, right? I don't want to be cold in this initial outreach when I have somebody that actually has a reason and a need to buy what I'm selling. So use your tools. Sales Navigator is huge for that in the spotlight corner, where I focus a lot on posted in the last 90 days, change roles, team link, who's connected to my C-suite. So just don't forget about that low-hanging fruit that's there when you're doing the prospecting blocks.
That's a great idea, man. And when it comes to having already accounts that you've prospected, right, or deals that have already been made, what would you recommend someone do in order to find those accounts or actually go back to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like being remote is hard, right? I say this all the time, especially in this world. Like you used to be able to just walk down the hall and be like, "Hey, do you remember that account?" And Leslie would be like, "Oh my God, yeah, Tom was over there.
Yeah.
And he was great." You have to stay in the know with your team. You have to be talking. You have to communicate. You have to stay deep into Salesforce, right? You can't just update it every Friday because your boss said so. You have to know what's happening and what's been down. And so, that's my biggest thing is organization and having a plan around that.
All right. And Leslie, could you add anything to that?
Yeah, a couple things like reports, just get really comfortable or find someone who's really good at it. Running reports within your CRM, like who's interacted and hasn't been spoken to in a while. Um, I'm never a huge fan of like talking about a failed attempt in the past, but just that name recognition, that brand recognition, it's an easier conversation. You can talk about what's changed without referencing something in the past.
Hmm.
And then Darren was talking about like where we are and that low hanging fruit and moving the needle. I also just want to give a shout out. Our numbers as salespeople, we're typically focused and we're like running towards the end of your calendar, the end of your fiscal year, whatever that is for you. So if you're a calendar year fiscal, you're running towards your quota at the end of December. But guess what? You're going to have a whole new quota next year. So like you can always be filling that prospecting piece of things literally year round. So it's magical no matter where you are, like Adrian, you just said it, but like thinking about that instead of getting stuck on, even if you can't move the needle right now, even if they're not buying right now, continuing to build that relationship is still so important, because they could be in a buying cycle come January, February, March. So don't just like pigeonhole yourself into right now. Look for the long-term plays. A lot of times we get stuck in this, like, how can I sell something right this minute? I need to fit like into my quota. And I get it. I'm there, but like, let's also play the long game.
Yeah.
You gotta.
I'll add something to that, Leslie, which is a gentleman by the name of John Dubois taught me this 3 years ago. I used to go to him and I would be like, oh, they don't want to meet with me next week. I'm not going to meet my number for the month. And he's like, hey, Darren, you're going to need meetings in February. You're going to need member meetings in March. Book them and move on. Right. And so like, it's so key. Think about when you get to January and you have 4 meetings already booked for February because of the work you did in October.
Yeah.
Beautiful feeling.
Huge.
But what about in the short term? I know there's tons and tons of speed bumps that you encounter, right? Especially when you're trying to just do so many things at once as a seller. What is one of the biggest things you find that sellers do? Darren, have you seen like a pattern, especially with salespeople?
Yeah. I mean, I think like I was just thinking about what Leslie said a minute ago, is like going back to those accounts that you were just at in the beginning. You've gotten better since then. You've grown, your outreach is better, your research is better. And so for me, one of the things that I look at all of my emails, I look at a lot of my team members' emails, right? And I try to say like, where did I fall apart in this road bump, right? And it's basically when I didn't think about that buyer or that potential prospect enough. I was in a hurry. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to get to my 50 when I really could have just went and looked at their sustainability report or their earnings report, or look at their mission, vision, and values just literally for 15 seconds and had a message in there that would have made them respond to me. I don't want to be like anyone else that's getting a message every day. So that road bump that I see is whenever SDRs and AEs are just like, all right, I got to pump as many of these things out as possible, when you could have taken one step back and been 95% certain that they were going to answer that email because you actually said something that no one else did.
I like that. Now, you mentioned being fast, like you could just go to their quarterly reports. Are there other resources that you can tap into to do this with speed?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to take a little bit of time, right? Nothing just happens, right? But you can look at metrics in Sales Navigator. You can look at Zoom info in the bottom of it, right? Like you can find all of these things. The only way to get fast at it is to continually keep doing it, right? Sometimes I train people and I'll show and they're like, slow down. It's like, I have been doing this for a really long time, and the only way to do it is practice. So unfortunately, there's not like a click that says like, hey, here's how you can tie your mission, vision, and values to this organization, but it doesn't take long.
And
I like you bring up, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, you mentioned a good point about metrics. Leslie, I know you had something to say on that.
I do. I want to touch into what Darren just said. I gamify it for the speed, for the efficiency, like looking for research efficiently, or else I'm going to go and I'm going to get distracted. And all of a sudden I'm like linked down this rabbit hole of a million different things. And I'm researching your organization, but it takes me forever. And I don't know if you're picking up the phone. I set a timer. I set a 3-minute timer, a 5-minute timer. If you're enterprise or strategic, like increase that obviously. But if we're looking from a very get-go and I still want to personalize to you because I know that's going to get me the highest % response rate, go look at their LinkedIn, but set yourself a timer. Look for events, hiring, different things about the organization. Like Adrian, you mentioned Darren, you mentioned mission, vision, values, right? Like mission, vision, values is a good thing. Look at their blog posts, look at their LinkedIn. I like to look at YouTube. That's my jam right now. Like
YouTube.
I go on YouTube. What videos are their organization posting? Can I quote someone? You're getting a way higher response rate on that. But I just set myself a timer. You mentioned metrics though. And metrics, another thing, I just keep talking about all the things that get a bad rap, but like talking about our metrics gets a bad rap. It's like, no one wants to talk about how many calls you have to make, but the number, like it takes me a little bit longer sometimes. Darren might be crushing it. I can't look at like, well, Darren only made 20 calls, but he's hitting his quota. So I'll only make 20 calls. Maybe I need to make 40 to do the same thing that Darren needs to do. So like for me, I need to remove myself. I need to look at what I need to do to hit my goals and make sure, like, am I backing my way into that every week? I think, again, it just comes down to like sticking to it, that stick to itedness. Like, do I have it in me to really sit here and make all these calls? And if not, how can I get more efficient every time? Set a timer, test and see what's working better, like testing my subject lines, testing my variables that I can, like, what can I do to improve, and not looking at anyone's success besides my own. What's going to get me there?
So you mentioned like being able to keep track of these metrics, right? See what's going to move the needle for you.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think that if they just blast out messages and send all these, they just hit a number. If I send 200 emails today, I should get an email, right? I should get a reply back, should get someone in the pipeline that wants it. But there's usually a problem there. It becomes very generic. Darren, I know you had a really good point on this. You mind telling us a little bit more about it?
No, I mean, I think like, listen, there's some industries where you can do that. And I'm not going to be the one to say like, you can't do that in every industry. There's some that's like, it actually works. But where I try to play this, right, we're moving pretty deep into social selling. I want my buyers and my prospects to know who I am before I ever even reach out. And so I'm following them, I'm engaging with them, I'm making sure they understand what my company does, because I'm sharing content. I'm sharing stuff about me personally, right? I'm engaging in their stuff. So like when I do send that email, they're like, oh, it's that guy that wears a backwards hat on LinkedIn that sits outside of the box yard that has a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, right? And so like, I don't want to be that person that's just blasting out 200. There's also a very strong chance that you can get your entire company canceled from even be able to prospect into them in the first place. So be very careful of like how you do that. I personally, and I'm not like everyone, I would rather do 20 or 30 personalized outreaches a day where I've engaged with people on LinkedIn and I'm sending them a very detailed message than blast 250 messages a day. To each his own though. I've had many successful friends that have done it the other way. It's just whatever fits your personality and what you like to do, because sales is hard. And doing something you like makes it a heck of a lot easier.